Hi again, as you already know, my name is Bohdan, and today I would like to take you into your adventure with Xamarin Forms. And in the beginning, I would like to tell you what will not be in this presentation. We will not speak about some architecture, deep linking, or some popular database for mobile apps. Also, we try not to touch any MVVM framework and go exactly independent solutions that could be used across all of them. Also, we not touch mobile cycle or app testing. What will be in this presentation is samples of good-looking UI and what it is, and some XAML code or some code behind C# when we need to write some advanced animations. So, good-looking UI. I probably will be obvious, but good UI is just not bad UI. But I'm developer. I'm not UI UX expert. I'm not designer. When good UI ends and starts a bad UI? Why the image in the right corner is a bad UI? It's have everything I need. It's perfect from functionality. Before answering that, I'd like to show you a couple mobile application from 2000s. All they done by developers, all they quite functional. And sometimes some of them still developed in 2020. But why? Because it should work, not be nice looking. And sometimes it's a true. When you're a driver or other person who never seen UI, you just make it work. But for most, like 99% of user, it's really depend. I know that probably some of you still remember that awesome Microsoft Word from early 2000s, where you have everything instead of user interface where you could write. So how could I divide the bad UI from the good one? The easiest way is just to compare one to another, but it's taking a lot of time. Yeah, here on the right, we have the bad UI. We have some corners. We clearly see each icons on the background. We even have some opacity and something like blur on it. But how can I touch myself to see that stuff? To not making something like on left. Can't unsee. It's really cool size that you may check in the evening and train your eyes, your brain to see all the difference. For example, it's just a first example. I will show you a couple of them. All other you could check later in the evening. They are definitely worth to check it. For example, here, right, in the right answer is right. Because we have the same corner radius like in a top message, like in a bottom one. In the left, we have the wrong corner radius on it. Here, if our first word starts from uppercase letter, our second word should match it. The words in one button, especially, or in small alerts, sentences should be in the same group. If they start all uppercases, it should end with all uppercase letters. Also, you definitely should check the margins. For example, in the right picture, we have the same margin on the top and the bottom for the word and for the icon. But on the left, we have two slightly higher icons than a text, and it's not looks right. In this example, in the right, we don't clearly see the text right in the button because we should write it in the white because it's really sometimes hard to see for some of the people. And here is quite interesting because some of you could tell, hey, the boss examples are right, but I'll tell you, no, the left one is wrong because we should catch up user eyes in the primary icons. We should give him possibility to another flow because it's allowed to skip, for example, like here, but it's secondary actions. We should attach user eyes, his attention to the primary icons only. That's why primary icon is clearly visible and secondary icon is still good readable, but not so catch eyes like the primary one. And here it just broke the typical rule of the decline button, and it's probably shouldn't be blue. It can be only if all your app use the same alert style, but probably you want to go with the red one. And here, we don't have such good contrast between the icon and the background. For example, if I try to interact with slides, you probably should see how it's better looks comparing to the left one. Also, we should be patient for white labels in front of images, because for some images that have a really bright background, it can be unreadable. That's why you should just add some accent background for see it clearly. Also, pay attention here to the borders, because borders should be the same like in the card above. Also, don't forget to aspect correctly your image. It's really important. Here we have again contrast. In the left, it's slightly better for user reads that here is a text search. It's not so bad in the right, but in the left image, it's definitely better. Thinner or thicker? It's interesting question, and again, it depends. But in our case, the right one is in the right card. It should be thicker. So after that examples, where I can learn that design. First of all, is best of Behance. Second one is a dribble, because for you, like a developer, you would like to imagine something because you don't have a designer or you want to make some pet project, you need some inspiration. And here is a perfect place for getting this. Best of Behance or even better, dribble, because here is a thousand examples of your use cases and you could just combine them and make the perfect solution according to your requirements. Also, you may read the Design User Interfaces book, where is described how create cool rules for your design system. Also, some companies or some time to time clients has its own brand book. It's a book where describe each icon, each border, each label, button, everything how it should looks like. What is a primary colors? What is the secondary? What is the gradient between them? It's really then easy to imagine how your app may look with it. Also, it has a huge opportunity for Xamarin developers, because we could create one app that exactly have the same UI in the iOS and Android. Also, some time ago, my good friend Boguslav Blonsky had a tweet that Scania Group uh, deploy his own brand book with a colors, where they describe how they create a colors, how they show the gradients from a Scania blue to Scania white with all gradients between them. Definitely one more short design books that you may check. So what's the UI UX design threats in 2020? Dark mode. With dark mode, your app can be seen by more amount of people rather than only the white, because you probably know that the newer Android and iOS already have built-in dark mode and propose user to switch between light and dark. But as a lot of developers, a lot of users love to have apps in dark mode, like you write and probably in the dark mode in your IDE. It's just the same. Also, good is illustration in UI to be in your app. Some cool animation later will show you how you could easily add it to your Xamarin Forms application. Also, one of the trend is animated graphics and micro interactions. Here you can see that it's used all simple controls, but with slight delay. Not so big to making your app really slow and freezing, and not so fast to catch up user eye that something appears. Here, a new button available, you could press on it, you can interact with it. Next one is a gradients. Later in the end, I show you a couple demos with awesome magic gradient library for Xamarin Forms project to make awesome gradients in any Xamarin Forms application. It's a trend of 2020. But if you don't want to use any gradients, you probably would like to go with a bold colors. For example, here we have 4-color app that use the same color with slight difference in the white across the all screens. It make it consistent. That's make it beautiful. If it use a lot of accent colors in the mixed way, it probably will not look so good. It will not be consistent. It looks like eyes taking. I don't know. It will not be the best solution for your app. Also, quite useful will have some functionality in your app because more and more users interact with all stuff, not from laptops, but for tablets or phones, even more. So you should provide just the same that your website or even more. Also, quite good to have some storytelling, mean onboarding for your application. Create some first view of your app from the onboarding screen, where you're showing user from where it's go and where it's end. For example, here is a really nice scene with that lines that go across the screens. Also, quite interesting and sometimes useful in web page is video in UI. When you have some video on the background of your app, for example, in the login page or in some page where users waiting or trying to decide for some actions. So it's a theory time. I know that it's not the newest thing, but it's really one of the most important. You would like to create the same application for both platforms, the looks, the interacts in the same way. Material visual for Xamarin Forms. With just one line of code, you achieve from default iOS apps that will look the same in both platforms, interact according to Google rulebooks, design books. How we can done it, all about that you will find later in the links, the nice short video from Microsoft. I will just tell you that after installing NuGet package, you just should initialize it on both platforms and add in entire page just one attribute, visual material, and all controls in that page now material. But if you want to make some of them default, just because you don't need to modify them, you just go for that special element and change visual to default. And that's it. You have default and you have material. All decides up to you. Also, if you need to modify it somehow because you have some interesting requirements or you found some visual bug, you could create your own, your custom visual, and just use it again only with one line after exporting. For example, here I create my custom material inherited from iVisual, then export, make here on element property change some modifications, and use in element where I want it. Icons. Every app use icons, but with a standard PNG icons is going so huge because you're using 10, 20, 100 icons in your app, you probably should go and check icon fonts. Icons that hard-coded in the fonts like SVG, not a PNG. That's why it's so tiny and so reusable, and for each scale size, each sizing of your screen in the phone, it will have just perfect UI. It will not have some ripped corners or other stuff. But probably you don't want to add 1,000 icons to your application. You want to add only 10, 50 of them. For that comes to play iCommon, awesome site where you could just load other fonts, eject only that icon that you want to use, and create your own font, and just attach to your Xamarin Forms application. How to do it? In the old way, we attach auto-generated TTF font or font from material, icons, or font awesome into each project itself, Android, iOS. Also for iOS, in info police file, we should let system know that we have some special fonts attached, then provide special platform value which say how that font names in a system, and then create a style or use it inline in the text. And like a tag, like a font family. And in a text, you should use a code from auto-generated font. Here, for example, is a good practice to create some static class, and they have defined variables with IntelliSense to use them in a code. But in a new way, it's much easier. It's Gerald from Netherlands, my good friend. He has he write one of the book was awesome book is Xamarin Firm Solutions. Also, he create awesome Xamarin Expert Day conferences in Colony, and he had an interesting blog about the new way to add some font to your application. Now you shouldn't add it to each platform. You just add to shared code, set build action to embedded resource, and export is with your custom alias. Now you're free to use it. Set font family to your custom alias, and that's it. It's worked with all fonts, icon fonts, simple fonts, all in one place, quite easy to use. Awesome. Also, quite interesting solution with a NuGet we could see from Dan from San Diego. He created a couple of NuGets with font awesome, free for solid, brands, and regular. With that, you could load that fonts you want to use and can use it in the standard web way or in the more regular XAML way with predefined static class that is already in the NuGet. Let's go further. Visual State Manager. One more cool stuff for interact with the screen without writing any additional logic in the backend. For example, we have some stack. We have the default background color for state normal. But for invalid color state, we're setting the background for Azure for that stack. Also, we could provide the same for labels or buttons. Visual State Trigger works with each iVisual element. And like the example, when we toggle one button, it's changed the color states to invalid, and it's immediately changed the label and the background of a whole stack. You could get much more about that from Gerald and James Montemagno from the Xamarin show. It will be in attachment as well. Animations. All about basic animation. One more time, video will be in the end. We had some simple animation like scaling, rotating, and easing functions like bounce in, bounce out, sign in, and other. They're pretty simple, but with that you could create really nice solutions. For example, shake animation. It's quite simple, just it's couple line where we translate left right with slight delay. We have a shake animation when it's slow and slow down and comes to 0. Quite cool. And it's just the beginning. Later I'll show you more interesting examples, but now we go to Lottie animations. Again, we should just install a NuGet package, initialize it in iOS and Android platform, and add a special animation view into your page. It could be looped, it could be autoplayed, all that stuff you could attach to your view model for interacting in the correct way. And also we have one interesting animation. It's take a name of a JSON file that should be placed in each platform in Android and iOS native platform solutions and attach like embedded resource special for Android and for iOS. And then it just works, nothing more. Where we can get that file? Go to Lottie web page. There we have a store with a lot of free or paid animations. We can download it, attach to project, and it works. Here, just one important thing. It could be too much animations in one screen, like here. We shouldn't interrupt user with too much animation because it will annoying. We should add them not all time, but only when we need to pay attention user for something, when we something happens or something is doing and then succeed. Really nice that we have it out of the box and we should just search perfect for us, download and just use it. Also quite interesting stuff is a CSS in Xamarin. Unfortunately, only few people use it, and probably because it never knows that we could use less for CSS with Xamarin. Why less? Because with less we could combine all selectors in a much readable way. We could eject a colors, eject and make some inheritance between the files. Because with a pure CSS is so painful to write each time the same color. What will be if our primary color is changed, even slightly? We should change all our files. But with ls, we change it one variable where it's importing all files, and it automatically auto-generate all our CSS files. All that could be done only once. When you set up in first time your project, you add that code for generating from less to CSS, and you forget about it. You just use it. So it's time for examples. First example is like a prequel from my presentation from Steven about building beautiful apps with Xamarin Forms. He tells about everything about the layouts, when you should use stack layout, when you need to use grid layout, and all the stuff connected with that. So I will not stop on it, because later you could go and check that video in the evening, for example. We will focus on the new stuff that we have at Xamarin, like a collection view, carousel view, indicator view, refresh, and swipe views. One moment, I will show you that in my phone. We have a link for that. It's quite useful application from focus on Xamarin, presentation from Microsoft, because we have a lot of interesting scenarios for collection view. For example, here we could interact with it and search examples that we want to see. For example, here with filter and with empty screen. Here you could see it. Later, if you find what you need in your project, you could just go to view model and check how it's done and just copy it to your application and it will work. I tried and it really works. For example, here is animation, bouncing, dragging for carousel view. About interesting new stuff, we have indicator view at last for some onboarding screen, for example. We could change a color or make it square even from a template. Also, I would like to show you a refresh view because it's really useful combining with collection view for showing a lot of elements. Here, let me find some with elements. Oh, and it's refreshing. I tried not to refresh, it's work. And we also could trigger refreshing from our view model as well. It shows a loading trigger as well, that animation with the circles. Also, the last example from here is at last, but not least, a swipe view. For example, just a basic animations. Or for some app. So all you need in your app. And we continue. Next example is a ghost animation. It's damn simple, but quite interesting from technical part. Because for simple label that is count for icon moon, which is just an SVG icon from font, we add some animation behavior with storyboard that repeats forever and has two animation. First, we sign in out, which translating for 1 second our ghost to the top. Translate minus 20. Second one, get it back to 0. It's dragging in my example because it's how I make a GIF, but it never drags in the real life. Don't be afraid of that. Pretty simple, but really nice for empty screen template. Also about templates, good to mention a state suite. Quite cool NuGet, where we could manage all our templates in UI. For example, when we have a loading, when we have empty, none, error, success, or some custom of them. That's quite cool defined in the UI because you define a couple of layouts in the one layer and it's enabling each of them when the current state go to the proper template. Here, for example, for a loading empty templates, you already seeing this animation. But with new later Xamarin forms, we could go just with refresh view, where we have pull to refresh. I already show you some triggers with all state manager and collection view with his own empty view template that you could use. Action menu with animation. Here, I like to start from the action button itself. It has another way of animation. It's a data trigger. For action menu visible when it's true, we have enter action. Let's change the default. We have exit action. With well, for that we have just rotating our plus button into 135 degrees, and it's creating some awesome animation. And now that button looks like close, but it's still just a plus rotating. Quite interesting. Button itself could be done in the really a lot of amount of way. It could be frame with the button inside. It could be pancake view, really nice nugget. But here we go with really interesting example. We create two box views. First them with a whole white color. Second one slightly, it has some margin for two for make the border from the previous one, and it has orange in the middle, all in the same layer. We have just a label. Thanks that for that we have all in the same layer, we don't see the first box at all. We see only slight border thanks to that margin on the second one. Menu done is pretty simple. It has some couple of behaviors for tapping on them instead of invoking command in code behind, and also has action button of the left, just the same action button with different icon. Because we bind the icons from code behind. Also, you may see that since here on the XAML code, we don't see any styling of it. All thanks to CSS. Here you could see the less code for the template. Here we can see that inside action menu, the box view should have that color, that opacity that we have in the background. Later, we have action containers, label containers, and inside a label container, we set it to light text color. That's why I love CSS in XAML. It's pretty simple to you to understand how the style are done, rather than looking in the XAML code. And XAML code showing us only structure of the code. I will not stop here for long. I just show you how done the hide animation, because we just fade it out and that's it. But open animation is slightly interesting because we starting fade in our background line and we don't wait for that. In the same time, we show each of our buttons, that action menu buttons in the same time. And they waiting for the last animation will be end. Let's go further. Some girl, Charlene, Dominicana, credit card payment. Here I would like to stop for a moment how credit card is done. It's just two columns and couple rows. Some rows have predefined hey for making some kind of margin without merging each of elements inside. For example, here we should set, if we will not set one more row, we should set margin bottom for both labels. Now we shouldn't done it. Also quite interesting, there is a mask, entry mask behavior. I tried to use it and I can't recommend it anymore because it stopped working properly. You easily can find in the links the implementation by yourself, how you may implement that mask. And it really takes only 50 lines of code and works much, much better than that behavior in the moment, unfortunately. And that entry, as you may see, is just a frame with a stack inside, some icon in the left, and our entry. But that entry not look like an entry. And yeah, because we have couple custom renders. We're just setting background color to null. That's why we don't know from UI where our entry ends. It's perfect for us because all our custom colors now looks like an entry. Next interesting credit card checkout from Kojo, from Loam. We not stop here like this credit card is done because it's really close to previous implementation with agreed. We take a look on that interesting white line that goes from the top to a pay button. Why it's interesting? Because there's so many ways to implement it. Here we have implementation with couple box used starts ends and couple times, but it has some problem visual because when we're scrolling, we don't see that white line. Sometimes it's per design and we want it, but sometimes we want to have the bold line from the top to the end. In that case, we could add it like a separate layer on the top with a grid with one box view that comes down till the end. Also, quite interesting is a flex button that could be attached to any view and stand all time in the same place. Again, we could done it with absolute layout, but probably you don't want to pack all your layout again and again to add something new for it, and sometimes it goes quite complex. There where comes to place that flex button. It's pretty simple. You may use it, or you may use, tell you, absolute layout, because sometimes you don't want to add one more dependency to your project because it's coming too huge. Next example is Unzone. It's awesome animation from Kim from Melbourne. Let's take a look. Really, it's pretty simple solution. Let's start from X. It has same animation, but we have entering attaching for it. And thanks for that Boolean variable, we know if we showing or hide it, because we use just 3 animation in the same time. We fade, rotate, and draw slide from 100 to 0 or in the wrong way. Also, we have a different length of each animation. It's take a different time. For example, fading is a shorter one, rotating goes a longer, and translates slightly faster ending than rotation. It's still pretty fast, but it gives for us that animation like it comes and stops for a moment, like it's really fast button. Quite interesting visual trick. Next animation is showing card, the drop downs. Showing drop downs quite interesting because again we're fading and don't wait for it, and in the same time we translate, and here we're waiting to end of the translation. We have the same speed of the boss, but before we translate, we set it to -90. It's set without animation, so it will be done immediately. But for me, I would like to set rotation and opacity before it's visible to true. You never probably will see it not rotating because it's really fast comes through that code, but better to make the correct ordering for that, especially because when we close, we have the correct ordering. Later it will be, not here in the next example. Closing is pretty similar to opening. We just fade out to 0 and rotate to -90. And here is that flipping. Here, as I tell you, we set is visible to true only later, after rotation. Here we have rotation 90, before setting to true. Quite interesting because we have from and to value with different easing. First is spring in. Thanks for that, we have retained to right for left. And second is spring out with a translating by Y. And looks like our card rotating for 360, but it's rotating only for 90 because first from minus 90, second to 90, from 90 to 0, sorry. First from 0 to minus 90, second from 0 to 90. Yeah, but with different easings. That's why it looks like it's completely turned around. It's flipped. And next example is magic gradients. It's pretty simple NuGet package that depends only on Skia and allowing you to draw a lot of awesome gradients. I will show you all that in a moment. The interesting stuff that you can use it because with Pancake View, you also could write pretty simple multicolor gradients, but only in XAML. In Magic Gradients, we have it in XAML as well, but we also may parse a complex web CSS, just taken from web and parse. But it should work like a 95% of all of them, but sometimes they are not working. But helpfully, Magic Gradient had a playground app with a database with more than 16,000 gradients inside of it. And you could just copy that and use in your app, just in a couple minutes. Here's a Magic Gradients roadmap that we had with Martin in the work. And in a moment, I'll show you the Magic Playground application, how it looks, and what we could achieve. Let's start from linear gradients. They're pretty simple and really looks similar to pancake gradients. It's from XAML, this from CSS, it's slightly complex, but we have a couple interesting stuff. For example, animations. Still under development, but they already worked. Which Martin tries to create a really awesome API for make it easy to use, easy to create your own animation gradients. Also, we have some repeating gradients as well. For example, this one is my favorite in the bottom. It's a really complex one. What's interesting that we have a radial gradients as well from XAML, from CSS, and animation. What about the examples I mentioned earlier? Here we have, I'm not sure even how much categories of that gradients, but all of them are really awesome. For example, the popular, that one I mentioned previously, it's done from this CSS, the backgrounds that you could just copy and paste into your app and forget about it. But if you're wondering how it will use, here we have a button, here it is, for seeing how it may look in the control. Some small buttons for some rounded or for background for list. For example, couple of the new, for example, abstract square that was imported nearly. Let's select any of them and check how they could go in the buttons. Again, we could just go to CSS, copy that code, and paste into a project. Also, one of the new features that we start supporting the background size. For example, we could repeat it if we could write 100 to 150 pixels. Could repeat any of your CSS because sometimes it's not so correctly resized. Here you may take a look how it looks on the large button. It's not so perfect. Here where our background size will comes to work. It's a huge plus because you may just find probably everything you need. But what we can create with that, like an example of all that I told you today, we could see the, one moment, I can draw. Okay, I will show you only in Android because in the behind we have, oh, I can drag it. Okay, Android and iOS. Here I use a material design for email and password, and thanks to that, it looks just the same. I used a simple animation here, for example. You may see it just with rotating, oh, sorry, with translating by X and fade in and fade out. Buttons are not material because they use this button use a magic gradients and the background done by magic gradients as well. But the button itself, this one is just has a transparent background with a border. And as you may see, we have pretty simple, pretty same behavior between two different applications. Here, how you may use animations, gradient background, and material, visual material in your app. So, is there any next adventure? Of course, because Xamarin is so awesome that it has a lot of interesting examples. For example, you may read about dual screen. You may take a look at Skia, magic gradients done on it. We could done this magic Skia a lot of interesting. For example, that interesting clock. It's all rendered in Skia. It's done quick. Also, probably you know that Flutter has a shared transaction, but you never heard that Xamarin Forms had it also. So, one more cool stuff to check out. And it's time for conclusion. I love Xamarin community because you have a lot of awesome bloggers. You could write to them in the Twitter. They could give you answer for all your questions. You may find most of them already in other blog posts. You could just come into this beautiful world and make a beautiful, awesome presentations that in once for both platforms that will work in the same way. Here is a link with 38 links inside for all attachments to this presentation, where you could find everything I mentioned previously. And if you have later, after all presentations, some questions, you may write to me to the Twitter or check out all examples from this presentation and GitHub. Also, the last presentation with login page is at my GitHub profile, or you may read about magic gradients at my blog post. And right now, I think we may get back to stage.